Welcome everybody to Lunch with the Boxer. My name is Gina. I'll be your moderator today. We are going to be recording this session and posting it on our YouTube channel for those families who can't be here live. Throughout the session, if you have any questions, feel free to go ahead and stick it in the chat box, and I'll go ahead and ask those questions at the end of the presentation. If you're feeling a little bit shy, you can go ahead and send it to me privately, and I'll go ahead and read those questions aloud anonymously on your behalf. Today we have a very special guest. We have one of our professors here, Dr. Brent Johnson here, and he's going to talk a little bit about our FYS class. I know most of you have heard of what FYS is, but probably not quite sure what exactly the class is, and Brent's going to be here talking a little bit about that. FYS does stand for first year seminars, so we're going to go ahead. I'm sorry, my phone is ringing here. I'm going to go ahead and mute that. I'm going to go ahead and just hand it off to Brent right now. But again, if you have any questions, go ahead and stick it in the chat box. Otherwise, I am just going to go ahead and hand it over to you. Hi, Brent. How are you today?
I'm doing great. Yeah.
Thank you so much for hopping in here. We have a couple of families, and we'll have probably some more families hopping out throughout the session, and we are going to be posting this on YouTube again. So thank you so much for hopping in. If you could just introduce yourself and then talk a little bit about what FYS is, that would be a great start.
I'm happy to do that. And thanks for the invitation, Gina, and glad to see that you guys are here. I'm going to assume that everybody is going to be a first year student next year at Pacific. And, with that in mind, that's why we have the first year seminar class created. It's exactly built around helping you guys transition from high school to the college level academics, as well as some of the social transitions. And I'll talk about some of that in just a second. To introduce myself though, my name is Brent Johnson, and I have been here at Pacific for 18 years. And I direct the first year seminar program, as well as teach an FYS class. And I also am a faculty member in the English department. So creative writing and literature classes are actually my forte, but I've been running the first year seminar program for about 10 years. And I'm really proud of the work that we do in that. And it's a really fun class in terms of how it is uniquely situated with a enrollment of only first year students. And, and there's some really cool energy that happens when there's sort of that collective sense of everybody's new to college. Part of that, sort of like you come in with those nerves of what to expect. And then I get to see you over the course of the semester, sort of find your feet and gain that confidence. To feel like, you're just like you found your place and you know how to navigate that place. And those are some of the main things that we really focus on with FYS and first year seminar. So what I wanted to do today is actually just kind of give like a quick overview of the program, just so you guys can see like what are the main things that we focus on with first year seminar. And then I really wanted to leave most of the time for questions, so that if there's anything that I've left out, or if there's some kind of burning questions that you have about what FYS is, I would be happy to address those. Let me start though. I'm going to begin with a screen share quickly. And what I'd like to do with that is kind of just to direct you all to the first year seminar website. So if you have any troubles, if you ever want to kind of, look back at any information that we have for the program, the best thing to do is just Google first year seminar Pacific University, right? That's the easiest way to get there, rather than give you the long URL. But more or less, like you can kind of see here what we talk about with FYS is that it is a class, like I described it earlier, that's really has two components to it. One is to help you all adjust academically to the college level rigors. It's going to focus mainly on critical thinking, writing and reading, but it also really kind of focuses as well as participation and sort of verbal contribution to a class discussion. That is going to be the sort of academic transition that we focus on. But then we also have sort of a holistic student and experience in mind. And that really is going to be related much more to, like, what are ways that you get involved on campus? What are going to be some of the services that are at Pacific that are going to help you succeed and do well, not only academically, but socially? And those two really big components, the academic and the social parts, are what make FYS, very unique compared to other classes. I like to kind of think of it as, this is the class where we actually stop and get to have those conversations of, how are you doing? How are the ways that you're acclimating? And you won't necessarily get that in your other classes, because they're really focused on the topic or the content that the class is concentrating on. In FYS, though, we realize that part of the content is actually you, and part of the content is your adjustment to college. And so there is a lot of sort of space that's created in the class just to have time to talk about those things, and to consider, all right, well, if you're kind of thinking about, how do I improve on this area, what are the ways that Pacific is set up to help you do that? So those are kind of the two main things, in terms of like what the class is trying to get at. Ways that we get into that, though, become really interesting. And one of those is, so all incoming first year students are required to take FYS. So there's sort of this common element in that way. But from that point, and I guess I should also say that we have these sort of common goals that we want to meet in all FYS sections. And those are, basically related to the academic and the social transitions, things that I was talking about. But then from there, it becomes pretty unique between each class session. Okay, so let's say there's going to be about 20 sections of FYS each year. That's going to be about average. And you all will get to choose basically on like whichever course theme, and how you'll sort of see these descriptions of the class, of the FYS classes, and you'll get to list like your top choices of which themes you would be most interested in taking. So across those 20 sections, you actually could take an FYS class, you get to choose one of those, and hopefully you'll get your top choices, and you would actually focus on a very specific topic. To give you some examples, I've been doing something recently where we do social justice issues, and we really look at incarceration, and how that has, been a very challenging thing in our country. And we talk about like, how would we make improvements on this? So we kind of look at the three acts of what it means to be incarcerated, like what leads up to incarceration, what's time inside look like, and what are some problems and challenges after someone's released. And we do a lot of readings, we watch films. I've actually had a multitude of visitors come into class. We've actually had former convicted murderers come to class and talk about their story. I've had judges, corrections officers, police officers. And then in the past, and I don't think it'll probably happen this fall, just still due to COVID requirements, but in the past, we've done a tour of the Washington County Jail, as well as gone down to the Oregon State Penitentiary and met with some men who were in the Lifers Club. So that means they're in prison for life, have a life sentence. And so really like what we're doing in that class, which is very unique to the topic of incarceration, but is something that is very common to all FYS classes, is that we're trying to sort of get into, a topic that's interesting. But what we're really doing there is we're trying to figure out like, all right, if we're going to try to understand this problem better, what are the approaches that we can develop to understand that problem? And those are some really, essential and fundamental ways of thinking and of learning that are going to set you up really well for your 4 years at Pacific. And so if you kind of think about it, like FYS is a service course in many ways, in the sense that it wants to serve how you are going to be prepared in your other classes at Pacific. So that was just one example of like a particular theme of, like what you might encounter. We've got, lots and lots of other options. And like I said, those should be available to you pretty soon, if you're not already getting some communications on, the different course descriptions that you can choose from. And I'm happy to answer any more questions on that, after I kind of, give you a little bit more presentation. I'm kind of taking you through some of this on the webpage, just because I wanted you to kind of sort of see too, what are some other things that we have in ways to kind of engage like what we do in FYS. Part of what I wanted to sort of talk about too is there are several different things that are related to a sort of like co-curricular experience with FYS. So while we understand that a lot of great learning can happen inside the classroom, we also recognize that a lot of our learning too extends beyond the classroom doors. So what we do is we have, what's one really nice thing about FYS is we have money that's given to just this class for faculty members to create some co-curriculars to where we will actually get to do something outside the class with you all. That can range from, I actually know of a FYS class in years past. I don't think it's being offered this fall, but they focused on sports. And one of the things that they looked at was soccer passion and hooliganism. And I don't know if you'd call it hooliganism necessarily, but they would take their FYS students into Portland, and they would sit in the Timbers Army section for a Portland Timbers soccer game. And so they'd use some of their money to be able to buy the tickets for that. And that's just one example of some unique ways that FYS distinguishes itself from other courses. And that would be sort of like tied into the topic. But we also have some things here like the FYS play. In years past, we take our students, like as a program, we go into Portland and we watch a professional play on stage. And that's a really exciting event that we do. Because of COVID last year and just sort of for requirements this year too, just to play it safe, we'll actually be attending a play on campus. But still it's a pretty exciting experience, just kind of seeing like what the theater is all about. I'm going to kind of skip down here to the last part too, and that is the FYS mentors. And I wanted to mention them because I've been focusing mainly on the academic side of things for FYS, but with the more social or sort of, what are the services associated with, meeting some of those academic demands. The FYS mentors are really in place to help you, sort of in that regard. Who are the FYS mentors? Well, each FYS section has generally an upper class student that sits in on the class itself. And I say generally because sometimes we have some sophomores that are FYS mentors. But these are students who have been at Pacific for a couple of years, and they've really kind of learned the in and outs of, like, where do you go to, access this need? How do you, get your laundry done? Those sort of things. And the mentors, though, will attend every class. They are really there to, ask, answer any questions that you have. And they are also trained to talk to you about certain success skills, things that they've learned along the way that have really helped them succeed at Pacific and do well. So it's really got a nice sort of component where you're not only having a faculty member in the class who's sort of there to guide you, who's sort of thinking there, as your advocate, but you also have a student that is assigned to, that you're particular FYS section, and is there to help, answer any of those questions as well. So I'm going to stop share that one because I don't think there's too much more to talk about on the website, but but do feel free to kind of browse through there, and it can give you a little bit more answers that you may have. Gosh, there's so many more things to talk about with FYS, but I think it may be best at this point. I'd love to hear what questions you guys have. And anything that you have related to either the academics or the social component. You may have questions about the summer text, whatever it might be. Love to answer those. We can take it from there.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. We actually did get a couple of questions here. And one of the questions, and I don't know if you would know the answers to this might be a better question for advising. But the question was, my daughter has had her last AP test on June 10th. I am worried that we'll not have the scores in time for her to get the FYS survey before the June 21st priority deadline, and she wants to be in a specific FYS class. In terms of signing up and classes filling up for FYS, could you give us a little bit of background on that, or do you think that might be a better question for Mike Shingle?
Mike probably could answer that one better, because I don't have too much to do with actually how classes are enrolled and when they are. I'm not sure, like, part of my ignorance would be I'm not even sure how the AP exam would affect being able to enroll in FYS. So that might be something that Mike could address better.
Perfect. Yeah, I'll go ahead and reserve. I have the name of the student or the person who is asking the question. We'll make sure to follow up with Mike Shingle. It's just typically the final transcripts and when all of that come in before students can register for classes, but we'll make sure to get that question answered for you. The next question that came in is the FYS course offered the first semester only? Is it one term or is it like a year-long thing? How long is this course?
Yeah, that's a great question. I used to sort of, think about, like, we call it the first year seminar, but the first year really is applying more to sort of like, you yourself as a first year student. So it is a first semester only course. So once you have taken it in the fall of your first year, you're done with FYS.
Awesome. And how many credits is the class?
And the credits are 4. And those are applied towards general humanities courses, or, like credits in that way, but it's part of your core curriculum. So as you take FYS, you're satisfying 4 credits of your core curriculum.
Perfect. And you mentioned summer reading. The book hasn't been shipped out yet. So can you go into a little bit more detail about what that summer reading is? Is it going to be a whole textbook? Maybe some more information on that.
I would be happy. And actually, let me come back. I'm going to share my screen again. So if you come back to the first year seminar page and you hit the summer reading, this will give you a little bit more information here. So this is something that we do, every year. There's a different book that's chosen each year, and the committee that's it's comprised of staff, faculty, and students at Pacific, and they narrow down a certain number of books. Then the FYS faculty, they take that list and they vote on which book they want to have be the summer reading. This year, it's called Reading with Patrick, and it's by Michelle Kuo, and it's a memoir. It's really pretty fascinating. More or less like, so Michelle Kuo, she was a Harvard graduate, was thinking about going into law. And she decided that what she wanted to do instead was to work for Teach for America. And she was placed in a really impoverished area, Arkansas, and started to see how challenging it was for members of that community to ever really sort of get out of that cycle of poverty. And she developed a relationship with this one particular student named Patrick, And it's an interesting, you could find out this information on the back cover. So I'm not, no big spoiler alerts here, but as she had left for a couple of years and Patrick had grown up, he ended up going to prison for murder. And he, while he was on trial, she came back to the area and started to read some of these books that they had started at one point, but new books that she was giving him. And it's just this really fascinating relationship she started to build with him through reading and through literature. There's some things that reasons why we chose this book is partially because it has a really interesting message in the sense that Michelle Kuo, she's Asian American, and she is the child of immigrants herself in this country. And so when she comes into this area that's predominantly Black, she is sort of finding some connections to her own story, even though she's also realizing there's some great differences. That's part of a really interesting piece to it. And then the other part too is just to sort of recognize how difficult the struggles would be to sort of overcome these odds. And I like that the book, it's, I wouldn't say it's a sad ending, but it also is one that has a lot of realism to it as well. And it doesn't seem to want to kind of sugarcoat everything at the end. So I think you guys will find it to be a really interesting book. Like I said, it's a memoir. But it opens up some really interesting questions on, how do we make the most good in the world? And what are the complications with trying to do something like that?
That sounds amazing. I think I'm going to try and snag a copy for myself today.
Good.
Yeah. The books will be sent to you guys. So you don't have to go out and purchase it. That's all already done for you. We will be mailing out the books to your house and the address that's in our system. So if you moved since you've applied, go ahead and let us know, and we'll make sure that the address is updated and that you are going to get the book. But everyone will be sent a copy of the book, so don't feel like you have to go out and buy it. We will be going ahead and mailing it out to you, and it should be arriving before the end of summer. So
and Gina, I might just add just one thing with that too. So the book will be mailed to you all. You'll get that over the summer. Also, be paying attention to your email, because what will come with that book, more or less, through email, is communication from your FYS faculty member, as well as your student mentor. So it's really kind of nice. You're going to get to meet them, through a letter, through an email over the summer. What's really important with the faculty email is that typically there will be an assignment that's associated with the book. So read that carefully, and you guys will get a sense of like, okay, a lot of times there's some kind of response, a paper, or this year what I'm going to do is have students respond to the book on a Google Doc, and then you'll get to read and introduce yourself to other students in the course before we even step foot on campus. So I like to use it as sort of like an icebreaker. We get to know each other and just get to hear, how did people react to the book? And in general, that's why we have the summer text, is it's something that the whole, all coming students, no matter which FYS section you're in, you will have read this book. And so when you're in the dorms, not necessarily, living with people that are in your FYS class, you're still going to have a common topic that you can talk about. And then that sometimes gets woven into other classes. It can get woven into orientation. And so there's some really interesting things that can happen when everybody's sort of read one book. And that's what's behind the summer book program.
I love that. And students, you've heard it from the professor himself. Check your email. This is something that we remind students as many chances as we get, because inevitably the email does not get checked. So make sure to check your email regularly. You are now a Pacific Boxer. And so that is part of your responsibility as a student, is to check your emails regularly. And so you will get your assignments and all that information via your email. Another question that came in, is a great question. If a student is a freshman, but also a transfer student coming in with about 90 credits, do they still need to take the FYS course?
And again, that might be advising center question. I wouldn't want to give any
Yeah.
wrong information.
Sure. So I can answer that. All questions for all incoming freshman students, even if you are coming in with credit. So that kind of ties in with that student who has the AP class, as those credits will also transfer in. Most of our students who come in are still considered freshman standing, regardless of how many credits they come in with, because FYS is still considered your first year class that you have to take in order to fulfill your first year at Pacific to be in like a sophomore standing or junior standing, depending on your credit. So all incoming freshman students will have to take an FYS class, regardless of how many credits you are bringing in. So hopefully that does answer your question in regards to the students who are required to take the class. Another question that we had is, does it have to be related to your major? I know you talked about different themes of the class and signing up for credits and all of that. I know it's kind of a lot of anxiety for a lot of our students because it's their first time doing it. Does it have to be related to their major? And for those students who are undecided, how do they choose the class?
Great question. It does not have to be related to your major at all. And in fact, many students, I know I was one, I came into college and I had no idea what I wanted to do. So, and in fact, I think like sort of philosophically, that's a great sort of approach to your first couple of years in college, is keeping an open mind to the possibilities. And or if you really know what you want to do, just sort of seeing those first couple of years as a chance to sort of, take classes that you might not normally. So the FYS themes aren't related to a major, necessarily at all. Now, sometimes, it may just happen that, if you wanted to be a criminal justice major and you saw my course description, you would say, "Woo, this fits one of my interests and I want to take this FYS section." But that would not count towards, your criminal justice major. And in terms of just sort of, like experiencing something that is beyond, like what you might consider more of your expertise, FYS is a wonderful time just to, follow that class, look at the descriptions that just seem intriguing to you and go for it. I think that's a great part of FYS, is that it's meant to be something that's not going to sort of contain you more into your major, but it's just an open-ended exploration of a topic.
Awesome. That makes it very clear. And thank you for also reiterating that if you did take a course that was related to what you wanted to major in, that it wouldn't count as a major credit, because that is a confusion there. So
right.
Yeah. And the next question that came in is, what is the best FYS class? I know it can be different. So is there maybe more popular ones, or maybe if you could just talk about some of the different options that we have for FYS, that might be a better.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Honestly, I mean, I don't hear, negative reactions to the only one that, I think surprises some students is there's sort of, an Islamic, how does this, like something focused on Islamic literature, I believe. And you actually get to learn Arabic in there. And I know some students who, sort of sign up at first, they're like, what is going on here? But then they love it by the end. That one is probably the most sort of unusual one. But, and I know there's some students really like the pop culture one. You get to sort of create your own, this comic book by the end. There's a one that I know that's being taught from a colleague of mine in the English department that focuses on storytelling. So if you are a little bit more on the creative side, you like writing more creatively, like that would be a good course for you. Like I said, mine is, on criminal justice. But you'll find like that's an interesting thing. I sort of wonder, like, why is an English professor teaching a criminal justice, theme in FYS? But that's also the beauty of it, is that it's one of those classes where I want to sort of get into, those problems that I don't know the answers to. And I kind of get to figure them out with you. And so that, that kind of problem-based, strategy is, I think, defines a lot of the FYS sections. So in terms of like recommending, one class in particular, that would be kind of impossible to answer, because I think it really depends on what your interests are and how those interests match up to the course description. So I think the best way I could answer that would be really take your time looking through those descriptions and be thinking about, does this sound like something I would want to take? Does even the tone of the description sometimes can give you a sense of how the class is going to, possibly be a little bit more serious, or possibly a little bit more lighthearted. Might be a little bit more, something that's going to be, accessing some people's sort of interest in, being more creative, and others, in a different way. So I think that could be, something you probably want to pay attention to the most.
Or you can just recommend they take your class. That might be.
It is a fun class.
Yeah, it sounds very interesting. I would
Yeah, we
definitely
learned some
take
neat
that.
things. Yeah.
It sounds like the bulk of the reading will take place over the summer. How often does a class meet per week during the term? And during the school year, is it considered the same amount of work as any other 4-credit class? Because it does sound like there are a lot of classes that they're going to be taking that first year.
Yes, great questions. And, these are such helpful questions because, I've been teaching this for 18 years. So I forget, oh yeah, there's just the basics of like, when does the class meet? So FYS, and another sort of common thing with the course is that all FYS sections meet Monday, Wednesday, Friday from 11:45 to 12:50. So more or less over the lunch hour. And really in the fall semester, there are very few other classes that meet during that time. So it's sort of like the FYS, class period. Those and so you're going to meet Monday, Wednesday, Friday along the semester. Now, a couple of interesting things just to pay attention to is FYS actually starts earlier than all other classes. So we will typically have an FYS class that meets during orientation. So let's say the Friday before all classes start on Monday, you will meet with your FYS professor and mentor. Now, the cool thing about that is also on the other end is that FYS ends earlier than all other classes. So your actual last FYS class will be on the Monday of Thanksgiving break. Now, after Thanksgiving break, though, we have what's called the Fys Final Showcase, and you can see some details on that on the website. But this is like a chance where towards the end of Fys, you start working on a project. And these projects really vary between courses. So some people will have like almost like a theatrical presentation on something. Other people will have more formal posters. In my class, for instance, we do what's called a digital story, and it's a 3 to 5 minute video where you've written a script, you have images, you have music, and it addresses a problem and proposes a solution to the problem related to criminal justice. And during this final showcase, 8 different FYS sections get into a big, massive room together, and they present their work to each other in a really informal way. It's sort of like people kind of stop by and you can show them your video and talk about it, or you explain your poster. And, in the middle of the room, we've got sandwiches and food. And so it's like a real nice sort of casual way to, present your work to others. And we do this because it's a bookend experience, because at the end of your 4 years at Pacific, you will be doing what's called the Senior Projects Day. And that's where you have 15 to 20 minutes all by yourself to present your senior thesis, something you've been working on for an entire year. And so this is sort of like our way of saying, like, this is just a little taste of what you'll be doing 4 years from now. And that's in the final showcase.
Awesome.
Yeah, and so that's at the end,
Mhm.
that's after Thanksgiving break, and you would have one day where you're meeting with these other classes and doing that.
Awesome. I was just about to say, it sounds like a mini informal senior project when you were just talking about that
Yeah, yeah,
presentation.
sort of sandwiches, right?
That's
Between
so
freshman
great.
and senior year. And Gina, I think there was one other part of that question I'm not answering, and I've forgotten what it was.
It was, is it going to be the same amount of work as any other 4 credit class that might be
All
on
right.
campus? Mhm.
Yes. So that's an interesting question. And again, I think it kind of depends on what other classes you would be taking. I think the general expectation that will be beneficial to you all is to go in knowing that FYS is rigorous. The point of the class is to, prepare you for other classes. So, there's going to be, several papers that you have to write. There's going to be quite a bit of reading throughout the semester to really sort of engage those topics. There's going to be the expectations of participation and seeing that you're, ready to go when you step into the classroom. In terms of it being as hard as, sort of your, intro to chemistry, course, I would expect that it'll probably be a little less rigorous than that. Just because, I think there's times in the class where we, sit and talk about like, all right, if you were writing this paper, how did you go about writing it? Right. There's those sort of conversations that can be, had and are really useful in terms of helping you understand like how you're performing as opposed to
Mhm.
just performing. And so
Mhm.
that kind of again makes FYS unique. But I think in a nutshell, go into FYS knowing that you're going to have to work hard in the class to do well. Um, I will say, over the years, you also have to work hard to fail the class. Meaning, if you just don't show up quite a bit, then you're not going to pass FYS. But if you give a good effort, almost all occasions I've seen, the faculty member is going to really work with you and want you to do well in that class. So it's not like a passing through a gauntlet into college. You made it through FYS, whoo, that sort of thing. It's really much more supportive in nature, but
Mhm.
it also is definitely not a cakewalk. So hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, thank you so much. And another question that came in is there a link to view all of the FYS classes, like a description of some of the classes? Do we have that on our website by chance?
I just talked to Mike this morning and asked for those descriptions to be available on the website. But I know traditionally those will be sent via email, I believe.
Okay.
So again, look from the advising center, um, communication from them, and that will be, I know you'll be able to see all of the course descriptions in that email, or there'll be some link to it.
Perfect. Yeah, and I think when you do sign up for the advising appointment, just like Brent Johnson said, there is going to be a course description of the classes, so you're not signing up for classes blindly trying to figure out what it is. You do
Right.
get some direction, and you'll have some descriptions in there to kind of choose what class is going to be the best fit. The next question is, if the class that I want is filled, will there be like a wait list, or do they have to sign up for a different class?
Okay, so like if you're talking about like the FYS themes and you're wondering if you don't get your top, I think you get to choose like your top 5 classes.
Perfect.
So and I will say like good news is that generally you're going to get your top choices, that we really work hard to try to make that happen. Last year every student actually got their one of their top 3 choices. And so that's a really good sign. If you don't get into those top 3 choices that you have, I think that there are some things that happen where they try to balance like the sort of classroom dynamics and to create a nice diverse class. So sometimes that can be playing in the background. But we really want to make sure that we try to get you guys into the theme that you're most interested in. To answer that directly though, like if you don't get into those top three, you will be given a choice for another class and put into that class. And I think, at that point, you could you probably write to Mike Shingle if you were really opposed to being in that class section, or you felt like there was some kind of error that was made. You would talk to Mike. But like I said, in the past, that hasn't been so much of an issue, and I hope that won't happen to any of you guys.
Yeah, I think Mike and his team does a great job of trying to place students in their top choices. It might not be your top number one choice, but they do ask for like your top three to see if we can get you into the class that you're actually interested in. And definitely talk to Mike Shingle if there is some issue with the class. As a small university, that's the beauty of it. You can talk to somebody. It's not just going to be sent to some email that never gets responded to. So definitely check in with your advisor. Yeah, that's thank you so much for that. I don't think I have.
And Gina,
Yeah,
sorry,
do.
I have one other thing too related to that. Is that I was just looking up some information, and you all will receive the survey that lists all of the course descriptions. You'll receive that on June 9th. So that will be sent, in an email. So just be prepared for June 9th. And I bet you've probably gotten this communication, but if you haven't, I'm just reiterating it. But June 9th, you should be able to see all the course themes that you'd be able to select and choose from. And then there was just one other note, and Mike had wanted me to convey this to you all too, is that you need to complete your academic interest survey and the world language survey. I think, yeah, you have to complete those two things before you can see the FYS survey. So make sure you're, on top of those things so that it all, is timely.
Absolutely. So for our students who have deposited, you should have received the email from the advising center prompting you to submit the AIS or the academic interest survey. For those students who have not deposited yet, and because our deadline has been moved to June 1st and you're still kind of on the fence about it, this is just some information about the classes that you would be taking if you were a student at Pacific, and we definitely want you. So you probably didn't receive that email yet, because that email does get sent to students that have already committed. So if you haven't committed yet, you probably didn't get that email. So don't be freaking out and like, oh, I missed anything. You didn't miss anything yet. It is being sent to our students who have committed. And for those who are going to be committing later on, the emails will be sent as you make your commitment and you get processed into our system. So hopefully that helps. I don't have any other questions. Yeah, go ahead. I think you have something to add.
Oh, I was just going to say, and related to that, also, I think like the deadline for submitting your choices, your top choices for your course theme that you want to be enrolled in, I believe it's around June 24th. And if you miss that deadline, or if you commit after that deadline, it's just a rolling basis after that. So basically, like, they'll start placing students in the sections, and then you can still put your top choices after that date. But it'll just depend on how many seats are left in each class, but you'll still be put into an FYS section, and you'll still get a choice.
Okay, perfect. So you get that choice. And I did get a question that came in, and I think it might be a better question for advising, but maybe you might be able to know the answer to this. How will staffing know that I won't be able to take the language assessment because I am continuing ASL?
Yeah, that's an advising question. Sorry.
Not at all. I believe when you fill out the AIS and it tells you to fill out the language assessment, I want to say if you are continuing ASL, you would still have to take a language assessment, because it lets us know which ASL class that you would be best fit for. Otherwise, if you are continuing, then you would start at the 101 level if we don't have an assessment. So the assessment test, again, is just to assess where you are in the language process. It's not a test to pass or fail or anything like that. So if you are continuing ASL or continuing another language that maybe you took in high school that you want to continue at Pacific, you do have to take an assessment test. If you are starting a new language, so maybe you took Spanish in high school and you want to learn Japanese at Pacific, then you don't have to take an assessment test. You'll just be signing up for Japanese 101. So that'll start from the very beginning. So if you are continuing a language, there is an assessment test that you would have to take. And Lisa, I know you added that question in there. It might be best to reach out to advising just to make sure that everything is squared away in case that hasn't been set up yet. So I'll make sure to follow up with you after this session. I don't see any other questions coming in from families here. Brent, was there anything else that you wanted to add before we sign off for the day today?
I would just sort of say, again, that FYS, to put it one way, I think it's a course that's got your back. When I talk to the faculty members that teach in FYS, we really see ourselves as, I used this word earlier, but we see ourselves as advocates for you all. We're going to push you. We're going to ask, for you to meet a high level, but we do that in a way that is, guiding you towards that. So, it's not like a class where, you have to, sort of, be weeded out or something like that. But it's really more of like, you're in it together with your faculty member. You're in it together with the student mentor. And, not to sound cheesy, but you're honestly in it together with each other. And I was sort of saying that, these are the reasons why we have a course like this and a program like this at Pacific, is it's a place where you kind of have like a home room to start off, college with, where you can ask those questions that may seem sort of silly or naive or whatever you want to describe it as to you, but it really isn't in this class. And so I just want you guys to know that I want that to be sort of like a comfort for you, is to know that this is why we have FYS. It's there in place to help you guys adjust to college, because it can be quite an adjustment. And knowing that there's a course focused specifically on that, to me is really worthwhile, in a class that I'm glad we have here. And I'm just excited for you guys to be here. I'm excited to be back in the classroom with you, and not on Zoom.
Yeah.
And, and I know you guys have lost quite a few things this senior year. My oldest son is a senior in high school too. So I'm really close to what you guys are feeling. And so I just know that there's going to be a lot of excitement in the fall, not only from students, but from faculty too, just to sort of be back together, doing the college thing. So I'm excited for you guys.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And we actually did get one last question in there. Are all departments represented in the FYS classes?
That's another great question. No, not all departments are represented. It is mainly humanities based. So a lot of the sort of sciences, in faculty in the sciences typically do not teach FYS sections. So it's mainly a humanities-based course.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Brent, for hopping in during your lunch hour. We appreciate you sharing about FYS. I think I learned a lot because I didn't go to Pacific, so it's always a class that I heard about, but actually hearing it from a professor who's been running it for such a long time, and just kind of learning a lot more about this class that we're always telling our first year students about has been amazing. So thank you so much for hopping in today. And again, we will be posting this on our YouTube channel. And I do want to share our next week's session is going to be about our summer class that we have. It is a free summer class, and it's going to be open for all of our incoming students. And you don't have to pay. It's a free college credit, which is amazing. So Dr. Ramona Alea is going to be here next week to talk about that summer class that we'll be offering. It's going to be an online class, and you'll get to learn a little bit more about it. And she's actually going to talk about another class in the fall that we do have, and I can't remember off the top of my head what it was called, but it's this class is going to be offered in June through July, and it's going to be for those students who are incoming as a freshman student. So even before you come to Pacific, you can take a class, earn a free credit towards your graduation, and just be in the classroom again. I know it's going to be another Zoom, and I know that's not as exciting, but that free college credit is amazing. So we'd love for you to be able to hop into next week's session and learn about that. But other than that, thank you so much, everybody, for hopping in. Once again, thank you so much, Brent, for sharing about FYS. We will see everybody next week. Have a great rest of the day, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.